I had promised you a few more words about Megan, our minister in residence. She serves as a visiting assistant professor of ethics and society at Starr King School for Ministry, the Unitarian Universalist Identity Seminary in California. She's also learning and writing about spiritual coping and chronic illness through the doctoral dissertation research. And I earlier said she's what did I say? Not quite reverend, yes. Not quite reverend, or an embryo reverend, because she's working on becoming, what's the word? Ordained. Thank you. Words go away. Anyway, also we want to welcome her partner Stephanie, who's joining us this week. So, Megan, identity, expression.
So good to be with you again, second week. I've had such a wonderful time here so far. And last week we talked about how to nurture ourselves through embodied practice and to be nurtured in community. And we'll have a chance to dig deeper into that during the workshop later today. And so I hope that you will join us. And for now, we'll be thinking about our interdependence and our connectedness through a different doorway. I don't know about you, but I am so glad that Annie in our story got to wear her plaid shirt and express herself as she wished at her uncle's wedding. Annie stuck through the theatrical representation by Eve, stuck to who she was. She knew what made her feel most like herself. She was proud of the way her outfit expressed her true self. Beneath the surface of the story, of course, there is another story of a community, the gender nonconforming, transgender, and genderqueer community. Those people who express identity, whose expression and identity may not be the same as the sex or gender in which the person was raised or socialized in one of their first communities. Gender identity is one's inner sense of being and one's own understanding of how we may relate to gender, maleness, femaleness, and all that is in between or neither of those, and so on. Gender expression can be the ways in which a person manifests masculinity, femininity, both, other words completely, neither, through appearance, behavior, dress, speech, preferences, and so much more. You see, definitions can never fully encompass who we are as full human beings. They will never help us know Annie as Annie's full self. We have a spiritual invitation to cross boundaries, divides of difference, and take risks by faithfully choosing to get to know one another. Labels and language can be tools of liberation or tools of oppression. It's all in how we use them. Think for a moment, what language do you use to describe or define your own sense of self? In the end, there we are. Wow. In the end. Annie wears not only her plaid shirt, but she chooses to wear an outfit that resembles her brother Albert. When I first read this story, I began to realize that the possibilities are endless for Annie's relationship to her gender. My assumptions needed to be challenged. Even as a lesbian or queer woman myself, I'm hearing my own first inclinations about who Annie may love, what gender Annie may identify as or claim. There may be many ideas about gender that surround us in our modern world, from gender reveal parties for expecting parents, to ideas even of what gender or gender expression a minister must have. or about who they can love. These ideas in our society can lead an individual to think that one way of expressing ourselves relates to one gender or one particular identity, or send the message that our own expression of self is wrong if it violates a norm or a binary, an either or. This month is Pride Month in many places in the country and the world. And you may have even had a pride icon on your Facebook account that now you may be able to use to remark whether you like something or not. The city where I live, Los Angeles, is celebrating this weekend its own lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer pride in a festival in West Hollywood. And this year, because of threats and the administration we are coping with, and threats that it has offered to the rights of LGBTQ people, there's also a resist march planned today to fight for the human rights and dignity of people in our community, reclaiming the message of the first Pride Parade in the 1970s, which were protests for basic rights and freedom from violence and discrimination, rather than just a celebration. Their mission says, "We are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer. We are people of color. We are people of different faiths. We are people of all genders and no gender. We are immigrants. We are dreamers. We are people with disabilities. We are parents. We are allies. And we are the beautiful intersections of these." At the time I went to my first Pride March, there were very few cultural images of gay, lesbian, bisexual people in the mainstream, and none of transgender people. The internet wasn't nearly what it is now. I had few models of what a queer female identity looked like, dressed like, and even acted like, especially as for a 14-year-old. But just like any high school freshman, I felt a pressure to conform to something. I just didn't know quite how or what. To the parade, I wore something that was completely outside my own normal outfit choices. The only images I had were that I needed to have sneakers on. I didn't own sneakers. I never had worn them before. I think the ones I had were from gym class in 6th grade. I scrambled to find a baseball hat. I never found one. I thought this was the only way that a queer young woman dressed. And so if I was out, this is what I had to be. I felt weird, all out of sorts, but at the time I thought that was my only option. I thought queerness, lesbianness had one gender expression. I thought I had to look like what society might expect a gay woman of my age to dress like. It would take me a while to understand that gender and sexuality are not synonymous, and that my expression of my own gender could include a diverse set of styles, clothes, and a mashup of whatever felt like me. I could still act out my identity as it felt inside. That my self-expression was not wed to one way of being a woman or one way of being queer. And I would learn that there would be people who would accept me, who would encourage me, who would love me as I am and as I desired to express myself. I had to be willing to welcome desire into my life, to relinquish the ideas that I'd been offered by society about what was available. This was a challenge for an adolescent, as it is for anyone struggling with society's prescribed ideas for what it means to have a body and have a gender. Getting in touch with my gender expression and how I truly wanted to present myself took time. It meant looking at the ways gender and sexuality had been described to me as a child, as a teenager, and a young adult. It meant embracing what I liked, without spending too much time evaluating myself for why I liked it, or whether it was a girl thing or a boy thing or neither of those. As a caring community, we can offer Annie's self-expression, we can affirm Annie's self-expression as a blessing, as a spiritual gift. We can leave room for Annie's authentic voice and to accept that the story doesn't end at the uncle's wedding. Maybe Annie will eventually lose the plaid shirt. Maybe she will sometimes like dresses and sometimes not. Maybe she will never wear a dress again, but find aloha wear and see a home for herself among you in Hawaii. Maybe the pronoun she will work for her. Maybe it will no longer sum up her sense of self, and maybe Annie would take another name or a different pronoun, such as he, or gender-neutral pronouns like ze or they. We can be open to however Annie continues to express herself. We can affirm a person's integrity and respect the inherent worth and dignity of each person. By doing so for one another, we can also give ourselves permission to be our true selves, to dress, to act, to laugh in such a way that gives us comfort and recognizes ourselves as whole and wholly deserving of love. I am a member of an online queer-identified women in ministry group, a group of women who all identify as femme. It's a community in which we build relationships, and we even sometimes meet in person. Even at General Assembly, there's a subset of us who meet. And we fight the stigma and invisibilities that come from claiming a gender identity, a femme identity, both from within our GLBTQ communities and in society at large. A few weeks ago, I asked the group for them to explain why they like what they like when it comes to expressing their gender. Here are some of the responses that I received. I choose daily to embrace and embody a revolutionary statement that masculine is not the default or the center from which we all radiate. Another, it pleases me. A third, everyone's outside should be an affirmation and reflection of their inside. And inside, I am technicolor and glitter. Solidarity with people of all genders. And lastly, in a word, expansiveness. Either or thinking can keep us confined, erasing complexities and reinforcing constructs that wouldn't allow us to embrace the expansiveness of our interdependent web. Gender expression, expressing one's true self, these are radical acts of resistance. They are blessings. I recently completed chaplaincy training at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, which is a well-known and historically Jewish hospital in a historically Jewish neighborhood of Los Angeles. And it also is in a neighborhood that has been historically affirming of LGBTQ people. While I was a chaplain intern, the hospital had begun a program with a physician, a urologist named Dr. Maurice Garcia, who came to build a medical center of excellence to provide gender-affirming surgery in Los Angeles and become a medical home for people who live beyond the binaries of gender in the region. He provided a concise lecture to which the spiritual care department was invited, and he explained to us that he believed terms like gender reassignment, which you may or may not have heard of before, or gender confirmation, to be focused on pathology, on fixing something that might be broken. He preferred the term gender-affirming surgery because it focuses on the community's attention to the integrity of a person. And I couldn't think of a more Unitarian, Universalist way of understanding a procedure as affirming. The purpose was to make someone feel better and affirm their way of identifying themselves, expressing themselves, behavior, and their general sense of self, which did not conform to what was associated with their birth sex in the place or cultures in which they live. Now, the real reason I bring this up about these surgeries is not to lecture you on the medical terminology of one piece of gender identity and expression, but it's what Dr. Garcia presented to our staff about what would make or break the success of such a program. When he was asked what would determine the success of this, he said it was the community. The community of the hospital and its welcome of the patients and the subjective sense of the patient's identity in terms of whether they felt that they belonged at Cedars-Sinai or not. Visible presentations of inclusivity, but also an individual's interest in affirming the genders of each of its patients, each of the hospital's patients, and not assuming or making judgments about identity based on expression. During the question and answer period, our department chair, Chaplain Jason Weiner, who is an Orthodox rabbi, stood up and said something that continues to make me so proud to be a religious leader working within the medical community. He said, "We want to help. We want to be a part of the community effort at Cedars-Sinai to bless and affirm the genders of our patients." He offered that our department of Buddhists, UUs, Jewish chaplains, Protestant chaplains, and even Catholics to provide such things as naming ceremonies or offering blessings to patients before surgery, to make it known publicly and individually that we were there for our patients and will continue to be there for them. This is one thing religion can do for people who are on the margins. In preparing to come to speak with the Leeward Ohana last night, I did a little bit of research into what the meaning of Ohana is. And I'm sure you can tell me much, much more as my expansiveness of understanding of the Hawaiian cultures continues to grow. While the name comes from a part of the taro root, I also learned that a piece of Ohana is that no one gets left behind, and that there is a love holding all of us, which becomes the glue that holds families and communities together. I love this term, the deep spiritual meaning in which family is not always the one in which you were raised, and that people have multiple Ohana, but the one in which you covenant to nourish and behave with equal parts responsibility and integrity. An Ohana can play a pivotal role in sending the message to people who are vulnerable that they belong, and that in these relationships we each take responsibility to be ourselves and respect the dignity of others. In thinking back to our story for all ages, we don't know what happened at the wedding. We don't know how Annie was treated when she arrived in her plaid shirt and bow tie. And of course, there will be other weddings for Annie to attend. There will be more places to bring her zest and for life and her gifts. As Annie grows up, there will be more desires to explore and defend. Perhaps it was a challenge for you to release expectations for Annie at the wedding. Maybe you felt a little more like my character, her mom, wanting Annie to be herself, but fearing for what others might think or treat her. I wonder what for Annie in this story will become her Ohana. For many gender nonconforming people, they move beyond the community, they move beyond the biological family in which they were raised because of rejection, ridicule, or even violence. There may be more times when Annie will need Albert and her mom to stand up for her. There are times when Unitarian Universalists need to have each other's back. And for those who are transgender, genderqueer, or nonconforming, those times have been ongoing and are still urgent. Unitarian Universalists are people dedicated to love. There are people today who are longing for a place where they are loved for who they are today and tomorrow. Peoples whose lives have been dismissed or misnamed or condemned by ideology or dogma. Unitarian Universalism may itself be a faith rooted in the welcome of people of all genders, of all racial identities, of all income levels, of all sexualities and self-expressions. But our world is not that hospitable place. Many dominant political frameworks, even within religious traditions, are not that hospitable place. My supervisor at the hospital offered one small example of how a community can work together to continue to bless the lives of the vulnerable people in our care. How can we reach out to bless one another at this threshold? How might our behaviors in religious community reflect the welcome we wish to offer all? We may change the signs in our bathrooms, but on my tour I was told that you already have gender-neutral bathrooms. We might fly a rainbow flag, you have one on your sign, or incorporate welcome of all genders into our mission and vision statements. We might encourage, like you have, I understand, for families to teach and take the Our Whole Lives Comprehensive Sexuality Education Program. We might be willing to challenge narrow or unkind ideas of gender at a wedding. We might need to build skills with each other to be able to challenge assumptions at a dinner party or in our children's classrooms. We might wear stickers that reflect our own pronouns or ask others, what pronoun should I use when we meet, no matter what we've assumed about their gender upon first meeting them. If we find our faith's integrity, not in perfection or binary, but in deep relationship and welcome, may all those who cross the thresholds of Unitarian Universalist community know that the truth of their lives is a blessing. And may we continue to open our arms wide, singing, saying, welcome, welcome, welcome.